For 5 years, I thought Milton was the love of my life. I was wrong. The man I promised to marry stood by and laughed while his mother called me stupid behind my back. He thought I'd never find out. But I did. And instead of just leaving, I decided to give him and his family the public humiliation they so richly deserved. This is the story of how I took back my power. If you believe respect is non-negotiable, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss stories like this. It's funny how a handful of words, arranged in the right order, it can completely reroute a person's life. For me, those words appeared on my phone screen about a year ago. I was mindlessly scrolling through Instagram during my lunch break, past the curated perfection of influencers and ads for things I didn't need. Then I saw it. A simple text post from one of those wholesome accounts run by an older woman who pairs inspirational quotes with slightly blurry photos of sunsets. This one said, "Only a fool pretends to know everything. The wise person asks." Something inside me just clicked. A lock I didn't even know was there suddenly sprang open. For all of my 23 years, I had operated under the assumption that not knowing something was a weakness, a flaw to be hidden at all costs. The fear of being exposed as ignorant in a room full of people was a low-grade hum of anxiety that followed me everywhere. But those words gave me permission. They reframed curiosity not as a deficiency, but as a strength. So, I made a change. A quiet, personal one. I started a new note in my phone. A private log I titled simply, "Questions." It became a sanctuary for my wandering thoughts. Anytime a question sparked in my mind, big or small, I'd pull out my phone and add it to the list. How does time dilate inside a black hole? Why do some snails have shells while slugs are just naked? Is it true that bread is bad for ducks in the park? What kind of inert gas makes old incandescent bulbs glow? The list became a sprawling document. A beautiful map of my own ignorance. And with every question I added, I felt a little freer. Later that evening, that feeling of freedom followed me home to the apartment I shared with my fiancé, Milton. I was in the kitchen, focused on getting the perfect sear on a pair of thick-cut steaks. The sizzle and pop filling our small space. He was leaning against the doorframe, loosening his tie as he recounted the mundane dramas of his day at the office. "I swear, I spent 4 hours today in meetings that could have been summarized in a single email," he said, letting out a long, weary sigh. "Do you think we all see color the same way?" The question bubbled up out of nowhere. A classic entry for my list. I pressed the steak down with a spatula. He chuckled. A vorm. Familiar sound that had been the backdrop of my life for 5 years. What? Where did that possibly come from? Erin. I don't know. I admitted, flipping the steak to reveal a perfect, dark crust. I was looking at the color of this meat, this specific shade of red, and it just hit me. What if the red I'm seeing isn't the same red you're seeing? What if my red is what you would call blue if you could see through my eyes? He walked over and wrapped his arms around my waist from behind, his chin finding its usual spot on my shoulder. The familiar weight of him was comforting. "You have the most interesting, beautiful brain. I love that about you." He pressed a soft kiss to my cheek, his stubble scratching gently. "Now, are you planning to solve the mysteries of the universe all night? Or are you going to let me eat that incredible-looking steak?" I leaned back into him, a smile spreading across my face. He got it. He got me. Or so I believed. He was my first boyfriend. My first love. My only everything. Our wedding was set for the following July, a date that felt both impossibly far away and right around the corner. Our life together already felt married. In a way. We had our routines. Or inside jokes. We'd end most nights curled up on the sofa, scrolling through documentaries on the iPad we shared, a simple piece of tech that felt like a symbol of our intertwined lives. It was all so solid. So real. I felt safe. A few days later, his phone buzzed on the granite countertop. He was in the shower, and I could see his mom's contact photo on the screen, a professionally taken portrait of her and his dad, both smiling with perfectly white teeth. A little too stiffly. When he emerged, wrapped in a towel, steam rolling out of the bathroom behind him, I nodded toward the phone. "Your mom texted." He picked it up, a wide smile spreading across his face as he read, "Oh, fantastic. It's the annual Miller 4th of July barbecue this Saturday. Mandatory family attendance," he said, his eyes sparkling. He loved these events. "You're in." "Right, honey. I wouldn't miss it for the world," I said. And I meant it. I adored his family. His two older brothers were loud and funny, and their wives, Emily and Chloe, had welcomed me with open arms from day one. I was genuinely excited at the prospect of them becoming my sisters, of having a whole second family. They always seemed interested in my life, asking about my classes and my part-time job cataloging old manuscripts at the university library. In my mind, we were already family. I just needed the piece of paper to make it official. That Saturday was a scorcher. The air thick and heavy with the promise of a classic Ohio thunderstorm that never seemed to arrive. A last-minute cataloging emergency at the library made me late. By the time I pulled onto Milton's parents' street, the party was in full swing. I parked behind a line of familiar cars and walked up the long driveway toward the house. A large, pristine two-story colonial. The air smelled of sizzling burgers and sweet flams. Freshly cut grass. I could hear the rhythmic thump-thump of a cornhole bag hitting the board, punctuated by the shrieks of my nieces and nephews as they chased each other around a sprinkler in the backyard. It was a perfect slice of American suburbia. I slipped in through the front door, which was slightly ajar. "Hello," I called out. But my voice was lost in the cacophony from the backyard. The cool blast of the air conditioning was an instant relief. I figured I'd just cut straight through the house to the back patio. As I moved down the main hallway, past the formal dining room no one ever used, I could see the party through the wide-open sliding glass doors at the far end of the living room. Before I could step into view, I heard Karen, Milton's mother, holding court. Her voice, sharp and commanding, sliced through the cheerful din. She was in the middle of a story, and it was clear she was performing for an audience. "And then you won't believe this," she turns to me, with those big, serious eyes, and she says, Karen's voice suddenly shifted. It became a high, airy, almost childlike imitation of my own. It was a cruel, exaggerated caricature, and it made my blood run cold. "How does the sun work?" "Milton, oh. I don't know where to put my fork. Why is the sky blue?" The questions she mimicked were real ones I'd asked in private. Moments of curiosity I had shared with the man I was going to marry. A physical shock went through me. I froze. One foot hovering off the floor, completely concealed by the wall. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. And then came the laughter. It wasn't just a chuckle, it was a roar. A unified, booming wave of amusement from his brothers, their wives, his father. The sound was a physical force, knocking the wind out of me. But it was one specific laugh. A familiar, deep baritone. that shattered me. It was Milton's. It wasn't a forced, polite laugh to appease his mother. It was a full-throated, genuine laugh of pure enjoyment. The same beautiful laugh he had shared with me 1,000 times, now turned against me like a weapon. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The only reality was that sound, through the ringing in my ears. I heard Chloe, the younger sister-in-law, speak up. Her voice was hesitant. Oh, I don't know. I think her questions are kind of cute. Adespérate. Pathetic flicker of hope ignited in my chest. A joke. It's just a weird, mean joke. Someone will fix it. Karen's voice cut through the air again. Sharp as glass. It's not cute. Chloe. It's stupid. Another wave of laughter followed. Even louder this time. Edgier. And Milton, he said nothing. Not one single word. I stood there in the silent, cool hallway, my body rigid. Waiting. I was pleading with him in my mind. Say something. Please. Milton. Say my name. Tell them to stop. But there was only silence from him as their ridicule echoed off the walls. My body finally obeyed a command from some distant, primal part of my brain. I took a slow, deliberate step backward. Then another. I moved in absolute silence. My feet barely touching the polished hardwood floor. I slipped back out the front door into the oppressive heat. The sound of their laughter still ringing in my ears. I got into my car. The leather seats scalding my skin. My hands were trembling so violently that it took 3 tries to unlock my phone. I texted Milton. Each tap of the screen a monumental effort. Hey. So sorry. I suddenly feel really sick. Think I have a stomach bug. Had to go home. Didn't want to ruin the party. Don't worry about me. The lie felt like poison on my tongue. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember stopping at a single light or making a single turn. When Milton finally came home hours later, smelling of beer and charcoal, his face a mask of what I now knew was counterfeit concern. I was already camped out on the living room sofa with a blanket and a pillow. I told him I didn't want him to catch whatever I had. He protested. But not too hard. He needed to be up early. After all, I couldn't stand the thought of him. Of his hands on my skin. Of his breath in my ear. I lay awake in the oppressive darkness. The familiar shapes of our apartment now looking sinister and alien. I listened to the soft rhythm of his breathing from our bedroom down the hall. And I replayed the scene in my head. Her voice. His laugh. Her voice. His laugh. On an endless, torturous loop. After what could have been minutes or hours, a sudden rectangle of light flashed in the dark, startling me. It was the iPad on the coffee table. The screen had lit up, displaying a notification banner at the top. It was from the group chat I knew he had with his family, the one called Miller Family Fun. The message was from Karen, and in the dim glow, every single, brutal word was perfectly clear. Did the little idiot actually buy it? It was followed by an emoji that was crying with laughter. The glowing words on the screen seemed to burn themselves onto my retinas. Did the little idiot actually buy it? The laughing, crying emoji felt like a tiny, yellow dagger twisting in my gut. For a long moment, I didn't breathe. The air in the apartment was thick and still, and the only sound was the frantic, panicked thumping of my own heart. A wave of nausea, acrid and hot, rose in my throat. I pressed my hand to my mouth, half convinced I was going to be sick right there on the living room floor. The screen went dark. plunging the room back into shadow. But the message was still there, seared into my mind. I didn't sleep. How could I? I lay there, rigid on the sofa, listening to the city's distant sounds and the steady, oblivious breathing of the man in my bedroom, the man who had laughed, the man who was complicit, the little idiot. When the first gray light of dawn began to creep through the blinds, I felt a shift inside me. The raw, splintered agony was still there, but something else was crystallizing around it, a cold, hard clarity. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to hide. I needed the truth. The whole unvarnished truth. And I knew there was only one person who might give it to me. I waited until I heard Milton leave for work. His routine of showering, dressing, and grabbing a granola bar from the kitchen, a grotesque parody of normalcy. The moment the front door clicked shut, I picked up my phone. My fingers felt clumsy, disconnected from my brain. I found Chloe's number and typed a simple message, "Hey, can we get coffee this morning? I need to talk." She replied almost instantly, "Of course." The Grind on Main Street in 30. The Grind was a small, neutral space, full of the smell of roasted coffee beans and the low murmur of conversations I couldn't understand. I chose a small table in the corner, a place where we could talk without being overheard. Chloe arrived a few minutes after I did. Her expression a mixture of anxiety and pity. She hugged me. A quick, awkward gesture. "Are you okay?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. "Milton said you had a stomach bug." "I'm fine." I lied, the words tasting like ash. We ordered our coffees, and for a few minutes, we made painful small talk about the weather and her kids. The silence that fell after the barista called her name was heavy and suffocating. I decided to just rip the Band-Aid off. I looked directly at her, my hands wrapped around my warm mug. "Chloe, I was at your parents' house on Saturday. I came in through the front door. I was in the hallway when your mom was talking. I heard everything." Her face crumbled. The pretense of normalcy vanished, replaced by a deep, genuine shame. She wouldn't meet my eyes, staring instead into the foam of her latte. "Oh, Erin," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "I am so sorry." "Was it a joke?" I asked. My voice flat. I needed to hear her say it. Did I just misunderstand? She finally looked up, and I saw tears welling in her eyes. She shook her head slowly. "No," she said, her voice cracking. "It wasn't a joke. And you didn't misunderstand anything. It was mean. It was exactly what you think it was." She took a shaky breath. "And it wasn't the first time. It's been happening for a while. Usually after you leave a family dinner, Karen, she just gets going. And everyone just lets her." "Everyone?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Chloe winced, knowing what I was really asking. She nodded. A tiny, miserable movement. He never stops her. Erin. He usually just kind of laughs along. I think he's scared of her." There it was. The final, brutal confirmation. It wasn't a one-off incident. It was a pattern. A culture of contempt. Nurtured by his mother and enabled by his cowardice. I sat there, the noise of the coffee shop fading into a dull roar in my ears. I felt strangely calm. The truth, as devastating as it was better than the confusion. "Thank you for telling me," I said, my voice steady. "I just needed to know I wasn't crazy." That evening, the atmosphere in our apartment was thick with unspoken words. Milton came home and tried to act like everything was normal. He kissed my forehead, asked how I was feeling, and started talking about his day. I gave one-word answers, moving around the kitchen like an automaton as I prepared a simple dinner of pasta and salad. The silence stretched between us, pulled taut like a wire. We sat down at our small dining table, the one we'd proudly assembled together 2 years earlier. He tried to fill the void, talking about office politics, a new project, anything. I just pushed the pasta around on my plate, the food tasteless in my mouth. Finally, he put his fork down with a clatter. Okay. What's going on? Erin, you've barely said 2 words to me all night. If you're still feeling sick. I slowly lifted my head and looked him directly in the eye. I held his gaze, letting the silence hang in the air for a few more seconds. Then, in a voice that was eerily calm and devoid of all emotion, I asked, Milton, how does the sun work? His face went through a rapid series of expressions, confusion, a flash of recognition, then dawning horror. He paled. He knew instantly. He opened his mouth, then closed it. A nervous, twitching smile played on his lips. What? What are you talking about? He stammered. Where do I put my fork? I continued, my voice still flat and dead. Why doesn't anyone like me? The color drained completely from his face. He leaned back in his chair as if I'd physically struck him. His first instinct wasn't apology, it was accusation. You were listening, you were eavesdropping on a private conversation, seriously. Erin. That's incredibly rude. The sheer audacity of it almost made me laugh. Rude, I said, my voice finally rising, laced with a cold fury I didn't know I possessed. You think that's rude, ruder than sitting there while your mother and your entire family mock and humiliate the woman you're supposed to love, ruder than laughing along with them. It was a joke, he insisted, his voice getting louder, more frantic. It's just how my family is, they bust each other's chops. That's all. You're being way too sensitive about this. It was funny. Funny, I repeated, the word tasting like venom. You thought it was funny. That was it. That was the final nail in the coffin of us. I stood up from the table, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. I can't do this right now. I need some space. I walked away from him, my legs feeling unsteady. I went into our bedroom and shut the door, turning the lock with a decisive click. His panic followed me. He was at the door in seconds, his hand rattling the knob. Erin, come on. Open the door, we can talk about this, don't do this. His voice was laced with a desperation that felt entirely self-serving. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was scared of the consequences. Please, just let me explain, I promise. I'll be 100% honest. I didn't answer. I just sat on the edge of our bed, the bed we had shared for 5 years, and stared at the wall. I listened to him beg and plead, and eventually curse in frustration. After what felt like an hour, the apartment fell silent. I heard the jingle of his keys, the front door opening, and then the definitive thud of it closing. He was gone. The silence he left behind was a relief. It was clean. I sat there for a long time, letting the quiet settle around me. Then, I stood up and walked back into the living room. The remnants of our disastrous dinner were still on the table, and next to it, on the coffee table, was the iPad. I picked it up. The metal felt cold and heavy in my hands. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm now. The frantic panic was gone, replaced by a chilling sense of purpose. I unlocked it with our shared passcode and opened his messages. I tapped on the group chat named Miller Family Fun. And I started to scroll. It was worse than I could have possibly imagined. It wasn't just Saturday. It was a disease. There were months of it. A photo of me from Christmas. Smiling brightly. With a caption from his mother, our little scholar trying to understand how ornaments work. A screenshot of a text I'd sent him asking about a specific type of bird I'd seen. With his brother replying, "Does she need help tying her shoes too?" There were jokes. Memes. And casual cruelties. All centered around the idea that I was a naive, simple-minded idiot. And sprinkled throughout, there were Milton's contributions. He never started them, but he never stopped them. His replies were a coward's currency, LOL. Ahaha, classic. And, most frequently, the same laughing, crying emoji his mother had used. He was a willing, happy spectator to my humiliation. The tears I thought I had run out of started to fall again. But they were different this time. They weren't tears of pain or heartbreak. They were tears of rage. A pure, cold, clarifying anger. As I sat there, bathed in the pale blue light of the screen, a new feeling took root in the ruins of my love for him. Determination. I stopped crying. My hands, which had been trembling, became steady. I navigated to the oldest messages I could find and started at the beginning. Methodically, I began taking screenshots. I captured every single mocking comment, every dismissive joke, every laughing emoji from Milton. I documented my own private execution, creating a digital archive of their contempt. Each screenshot was a piece of evidence. Each click of the side and volume buttons was a step towards something I didn't have a name for yet. It wasn't revenge. It felt like justice. I was in the middle of this grim task when my phone, sitting beside me on the sofa, buzzed. It was a new text message. From Milton. My finger hovered over the notification, and I felt a fresh wave of ice flow through my veins. I opened it. "Hey. I talked to Mom. She feels absolutely terrible. Says it was all a huge misunderstanding and she was just kidding around. She wants to call you to clear things up." I stared at the text message on my phone, the words blurring and sharpening in my vision. Clear things up. A huge misunderstanding. The language of gaslighting. So casual. So insulting. He wasn't just making excuses. He was trying to erase my reality. He was telling me that the sound of his own laughter, the cruel caricature in his mother's voice, the months of contempt I had just scrolled through, all of it was a figment of my oversensitive imagination. They hadn't just mocked me. They were now trying to convince me I was crazy for being hurt by it. That was the moment something inside me snapped shut. A final, definitive click. The part of me that might have, under some insane circumstance, considered forgiveness, simply ceased to exist. They thought I was a joke. They were about to find out how wrong they were. I ignored his message. I ignored the follow-up question mark that appeared a few minutes later. Instead, I finished my grim work. I took the last of the screenshots. My movements precise and efficient. I created a new album in my photos, moved every single piece of evidence into it, and then uploaded the entire folder to my personal, secure cloud drive. Then I deleted the album from the iPad, leaving no trace. My heart was a cold, hard stone in my chest. There was no more pain. There was only a plan. My hands were perfectly steady as I scrolled through my contacts and pressed the call button next to the name Sarah. She was my best friend. My rock since the first day of college. She answered on the second ring. Hey. I was just about to text you. Are we still on for brunch Sunday? Her voice was a warm, welcome wave of normalcy in the wreckage of my life. I took a breath. Sarah, I said, and my voice was so calm it surprised even me. It's over. Milton and we're done. I need you. Can you come over? There was a half-second of stunned silence on the other end of the line. There were no questions. No demands for an explanation. Just a simple, unwavering, I'm on my way. Don't do anything until I get there. I'll bring wine. She hung up. That was Sarah. She didn't need the details to know she needed to show up. 20 minutes later, she was at the door. A bottle of red wine in one hand and a look of fierce protectiveness on her face. As I let her in, the dam I had so carefully constructed inside me broke. Just for a moment, I collapsed into her arms and finally let out the choked, ragged sobs I'd been holding back. She just held me, stroking my hair, letting me cry it all out onto her shoulder. When I was done, she led me to the sofa, poured 2 large glasses of wine, and said, "Okay, tell me everything." And I did. I told her about the barbecue, the voices, the laughter. I told her about the tense dinner, the pathetic excuses, and finally, I told her about the iPad and the months of messages. By the time I finished, her face was a mask of cold fury. That spineless, gutless son of a bitch, she said, her voice low and dangerous. And his mother, my God. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We are getting you out of here. Tonight. The next morning, while Milton was safely at work, thinking his mother was going to smooth everything over with a phone call, Sarah's car pulled up outside. The extraction had begun. We moved with a quiet, focused efficiency. It was a strange, heartbreaking process, dissecting a 5-year relationship into piles of what to take and what to leave behind. I took my books, my clothes, the old, chipped mug that was my favorite. I took the framed photo of me and Sarah at our college graduation. I left the expensive coffee maker he'd bought me for Christmas. I left the collection of Blu-rays we'd spent years curating. I left the throw blanket we always curled up under on the sofa. Anything that was more us than me stayed behind. Sarah was a general, directing the operation. Don't think. Just pack. She commanded when she saw me hesitating over a faded concert t-shirt. Memories are baggage right now. We're traveling light. In under 2 hours, my life was packed into 4 cardboard boxes and 2 suitcases. The apartment looked sterile and impersonal, stripped of my presence. The last thing to do was the most important. I walked over to the coffee table, where the iPad still sat. Next to it, I placed a small, plain piece of white paper. On it, I had written 5 words. This joke isn't funny anymore. Goodbye. Then, I took a deep breath and slid the diamond engagement ring from my finger. It felt heavier than I remembered. A circle of pale, indented skin was left behind. A ghost of a promise. I placed the ring on top of the note. The diamond winked in the morning light. A cold, meaningless sparkle. The instrument of their betrayal next to the symbol of his broken vow. It felt right. Sarah's apartment was a sanctuary. It was smaller. Monsieur. But it was filled with her warmth and it was safe. After we'd hauled my boxes inside, she set me up on her couch with a blanket and a cup of tea. You rest, she said. I'll handle dinner. And tomorrow, we handle them. I spent the rest of Friday in a strange, suspended state. I felt hollowed out, but also strangely calm. The storm of emotion had passed, leaving behind a clear, cold sky. That evening, after we ate pizza straight from the box, I opened my laptop. It was time. I didn't open a blank document and start typing in a rage. I approached it like a research paper. I created a new document and gave it a title, The Narrative. I started writing, my fingers flying across the keyboard. My tone wasn't hysterical or vengeful. It was factual, calm, and devastatingly clear. I laid out the story from the beginning, our 5-year relationship. My love for his family. My quirky habit of asking questions. Then, I detailed what I had overheard at the barbecue and his subsequent defense of their actions. I wrote about respect and trust, and how the foundation of our entire future had been built on a lie. Then came the time to choose the evidence. I couldn't post all 50 screenshots. That would be overwhelming. Chaotic. I needed surgical precision. I scrolled through the images I had saved. My heart a steady, slow drum. I selected 3. The first was a text from his mother, Karen, calling me the little idiot. The second was a message from his older brother, making a cruel joke about my intelligence. The third, the kill shot, was Milton's reply to that joke, a simple, gleeful, laughing, crying emoji. It was all there, the cruelty, the complicity, and the cowardice. All in 3 neat images. I embedded them into the post, took a deep breath, and read the whole thing one last time. It was perfect. It was the truth. It's ready, I said to Sarah, who was sitting on the floor, pretending to read a magazine but really just watching over me. She came and sat beside me, reading the post over my shoulder. When she finished, she let out a long, slow whistle. Dumb, Erin, she said softly. That's brutal. In the quietest, most dignified way possible. Are you sure? I nodded. I am. Okay, she said. Let's do it. I hovered the cursor over the post button on Facebook. My hand was steady. I thought about the 5 years of love I thought I'd had. I thought about the sound of his laughter. I thought about the future I had just lost. And the new, uncertain one I was about to create for myself. Then I clicked. For a moment, nothing happened. And then, the deluge. My phone, sitting on the coffee table, began to vibrate. It didn't stop. The screen lit up with a constant, strobing cascade of notifications. Facebook comments, likes, shares. Then came the text messages, one after another. From friends, from acquaintances, from people I hadn't spoken to in years. The screen was a waterfall of their names. The sound was a frantic, incessant buzzing, like a trapped hornet. It was the sound of our shared world imploding. I watched it for a full minute, my expression unreadable. Then, I picked up the phone. I didn't open any of the messages. I went to my contacts. I found Karen's name and pressed block. Then his father. Then his brothers. And their wives, even Chloe. I felt a pang of regret for her. But I needed a clean break. Finally, I found Milton's name. I looked at the picture of us, smiling on a beach. For one last second. Then I blocked him. 2. On everything. Phone. Social media. All of it. A digital amputation. The phone was still vibrating uncontrollably. I couldn't stand the noise anymore. I held it out to Sarah. Can you? She understood immediately. She took the phone from my hand and silenced it. I'll keep an eye on it, she said gently. I'll only tell you if something really important happens. Now, go take a shower. Wash the whole day off. I did as she said. I stood under the hot water for a long time, letting the steam fill my lungs, feeling nothing but the sensation of water on my skin. When I came out, wrapped in a towel, Sarah was sitting on the couch, staring at my phone in her hand. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with something between shock and awe. Erin, she said, her voice barely a whisper. It's been an hour. Your post. It has over 500 shares. 500 shares. The number hung in the air between us. Feeling both abstract and monumental, I stared at Sarah, trying to process the information. It wasn't a feeling of triumph, not the giddy rush of victory I might have expected. It was a strange, hollow, and profoundly validating emptiness. It was the quiet confirmation that my private pain was now a public truth. I had screamed into the void, and the void was screaming back. I slowly sank onto the couch, pulling a blanket around my shoulders, feeling a sudden, deep chill despite the warmth of the apartment. I felt like a spectator to my own life, watching from a great, secure distance as the storm I had unleashed began to rage. For the next 2 days, Sarah acted as my filter, my shield from the outside world. My phone stayed on silent. In her possession, periodically, she would give me updates, reading from the screen in a low, steady voice. The social earthquake was bigger than I could have imagined. Mutual friends, people who had known both Milton and me for years, were leaving comments on my post. They weren't just messages of support for me, they were expressions of profound disappointment in him. Milton, I've known you since high school. I never thought you were this person. This is horrifying. Erin, we stand with you. Someone who had been a groomsman in his brother's wedding simply wrote, wow. Just, wow. Towered. The digital community we had built together had picked a side, and it wasn't his. Sarah told me he had deactivated his Facebook account entirely, a ghost vanishing from the platform where he had been publicly tried and convicted. The fallout was bleeding into the real world. Sarah got a text from a mutual friend, Jessica, who worked in the same building as Milton. She said the gossip was everywhere. People were looking at him differently, whispering as he walked down the hall. He was no longer the charming, easygoing Milton everyone knew. He was the man who had let his fiancée be crucified by his family, and then laughed. The most telling message came on Sunday afternoon. Chloe, having found her number blocked, had messaged Sarah on Instagram. She had clearly been crying when she wrote it. Sarah, please tell Erin I am so sorry for my part in this. I should have been stronger. The family it's imploding. No one is speaking to each other. My husband and his brother are furious with Milton for letting this happen. And Karen is just screaming at everyone. Please just tell Erin I hope she finds peace. Sarah read it to me, and I felt a flicker of something. Not pity, but a sad, detached acknowledgement. I had thrown a stone into the stagnant pond of their family, and the ripples were turning into waves. Their dysfunction, hidden behind a facade of perfect barbecues and polite smiles, was now on full display. And they were tearing each other apart. A week passed. A week of sleeping on Sarah's couch, of watching old movies, of slowly, carefully putting the pieces of myself back together. I felt fragile, but not broken. The numbness was receding, replaced by a quiet, steady sense of my own presence in the world. I knew there was one last thing I had to do. I needed my things. The rest of my life that was still sitting in that apartment. I arranged a time with Milton over a single, sterile text message. Sarah insisted on coming with me. Walking up to the apartment door felt like visiting a grave. The key still worked in the lock. But the place I stepped into was no longer my home. It was just a space, filled with objects that seemed to belong to someone else. Milton was there, standing awkwardly in the middle of the living room. He looked terrible. He was unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes. And he seemed smaller somehow. Diminished. "Erin," he said, his voice raspy. He took a step toward me, but stopped when he saw Sarah standing right behind me. Her arms crossed, her expression like stone. "I'm just here for my things." "Milton," I said. My voice even. I refused to let him see any emotion. "Wait. Please," he said, his eyes pleading. "Can we just talk for 1 minute? I am so sorry. What I did, it was unforgivable. I was a coward. I know that. I love you. And I broke your trust. And I will regret it for the rest of my life. I've just been so lost without you." I listened to the words. They were the right words. The ones I might have died to hear a week ago. But now, they were meaningless. They were hollow. I could see them for what they were, a desperate, last-ditch effort to fix his own shattered image. I looked at him. Really looked at him. One last time. There was no anger left. No hatred. There was just a vast, empty space where my love for him used to be. "Your apology isn't for me, Milton," I said, my voice soft but firm. "It's for your reputation. You're not sorry for hurting me. You're sorry you got caught. I am no longer a part of your story. And you are no longer a part of mine. I wish you well." He seemed to deflate, the last bit of hope draining from his face. He finally understood. It was truly over. Sarah and I worked in silence, packing the last of my belongings into boxes. He just stood there, watching, a ghost in his own home. As we carried the last box out the door, I didn't look back. I closed the door behind me. And with that final click, I closed the door on that entire chapter of my life. Walking out into the bright afternoon sunlight, I took a deep, shuddering breath. The air felt clean, fresh. A profound, unbelievable sense of peace washed over me. It wasn't the thrill of victory. It was the quiet, bone-deep relief of a prisoner who has just been set free. The weight I had been carrying for so long, the weight of their judgment and his betrayal, simply dissolved. I was free. A few months later, the city was settling into the crisp beauty of autumn. I was in my own apartment now. A small but sunny one-bedroom closer to the university. It smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. My life was my own again. The quiet weekends were filled with books and long walks in the park. The silence was no longer lonely. It was peaceful. I was sitting on the floor of my new living room, surrounded by cardboard and confusing instructions, trying to assemble a multi-level cat tree. It was a slow, frustrating process. But with each screw I tightened and each platform I attached, I felt like I was building something more than just a piece of furniture. I was building a life. A home. Patiently. Deliberately. My laptop was open on the coffee table, and a notification popped up, pulling me from my work. It was an email. My heart gave a little flutter. I clicked it open. The subject line read, "Congratulations from Harvard X." I had been accepted into the CS50 computer science course I had applied for weeks ago. A challenging, exciting new path I had chosen for myself. A wide, genuine smile spread across my face. My curiosity, the very part of me that they had deemed stupid, was the engine that was now propelling me into a brighter future. Just then, I heard a tiny, plaintive meow from behind me. I turned to see a small, fuzzy black kitten with enormous green eyes tentatively poking its head out of a carrier Sarah had dropped off an hour earlier. I had adopted him from a local shelter the day before. I smiled and reached out my hand. "Hey there," I whispered. "Welcome home." He cautiously padded out of the carrier, sniffed me fingers, and then, with a rumbling purr, he rubbed his head against my hand. I gently scooped him up. He was a tiny, warm ball of life, fitting perfectly in my arms. I walked over to the large window that overlooked the city, holding him close. The afternoon sun streamed in, warming my face. Outside, the world was vast and full of things I didn't know. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt like the most wonderful, exciting thing in the world. I had found the answer to the only question that had ever truly mattered: my own worth. And I would never be afraid to ask questions again.